Alright, so I got a request from a YouTube user requesting some sort of reply for white against the French. And this struck me as quite a good idea because French players who play e4, sometimes you don't know exactly what you should do with white. And I have said before, I think white's best choice against the French is the Tarrasch variation. And what I'm going to recommend to you is a little twist on it. Not the classical Tarrasch. We're going to play something a little bit more exciting. I would say that this opening I'm going to show you is not for players below 1500. It would be instructive for you to watch this video to learn what to do against it as black and do some research on your own. But I wouldn't recommend playing this opening as white until you're at least, an intermediate level player, because it can be complicated. So that's just a word of warning. And here we start e4 and black plays e6. And when I play against the French, I have found knight d2 is the most solid and probably easiest approach for white. I'm going to be mainly focusing on knight f6 as it is the main response. I don't believe c5 is the best here. I know it's been played in the past and it's not very popular anymore. I think just the simple knight f3 and after knight c6 take and play bishop out to b5, and really the problem here is that black cannot avoid getting an isolated queen's pawn. And white's going to have, after the exchange, we're going to wait for the bishop on c8 to move, f8, I'm sorry, to move, and then we'll take on right on c5, and he's going to be saddled with a IQP. So after something like bishop d6, we take. And then, of course, the bishop has to take again, sort of like in the Slav, where you wait for the bishop to move before you take. And black's going to have... he's not losing or anything, but he's going to have some trouble, and I think white is got a definite small advantage here, playing against the isolated queen's pawn, and black is going to have to be very careful. So I think if you see c5, just play knight f3, very simple game, and sometimes even though they play c5, it'll transpose to the line with knight f6 anyway, so you don't have to worry about it. But the main move, knight f6, and even if you're not a French player, I'm going to try to explain to you what black is aiming to do. Black is, of course, wanting you to play e5, and we are going to oblige them. And they play knight to d7, and they're, of course, planning c5, and we play the bishop out to d3. This is standard for the Tarrasch variation. The bishop is well placed there, and it's going to provide excellent attacking possibilities, namely because the black knight is not on f6. And in this variation that I'm going to recommend, the black knight never is going to get to f6. And that's very important to remember. c5, black must play this. c3, protecting our center. So this is all standard. Knight c6, again attacking the center. And here, instead, I'm going to recommend the move knight f3 here. And this is very, I really like this move. It's very exciting to play, and black has really difficult time playing against it. The standard, let me say, knight f3 does involve a pawn sacrifice by white. And I know some of you immediately almost are about to turn off this video at the thought of having to sacrifice a pawn. But I assure you, this, if it's good for anyone, it is good for white. White is going to get a massive amount of play for this pawn. And one of the key, I would say, developments in your chess strength is learning how important the initiative is. And that a pawn, when you're a very weak player, is very important. But the stronger you get, the more you understand that pawns are not everything, and that initiative can prove to be very dangerous. I'm going to show you a game at the end of this. But for those of you who want to just glance at the classical variation, it's knight e2, and the idea, of course, is we're going to, after the take on d4, so the main line is this, and black plays f6, and white is going to take. This is the more classical approach, and black plays bishop d6 here, preparing to castle. White castles, and depending on what, if black plays queen c7 here, and the objective is to prevent bishop f4, the best move is just bishop f5, and after castle, bishop h4, which is a very mysterious looking move, but it's very sensible. We're planning to bring the bishop back to g3 in exchange. Another option, I'm not spending a lot of time on this because it's not my main recommendation, I'm just showing it to you. Another move is rook c1. And if black, so let's just go back, I want you to just see a couple options so you can at least make an informed choice. If black just castles here, then bishop f4 is very strong, and black practically has to take here. And white's going to have a good game. Really good play against the weak pawn on e6. So I mean, it's sort of depends on what you like, but please at least give the variation I'm recommending a shot. And because I'm a French player, I understand the difficulties that black faces. So knight f3, and here black, if he so chooses, and they almost always do, queen b6, black can win a pawn here, and the pawn on d4. And I've said many times, when the pawn on d4 goes, you know, white has real trouble keeping e5 under control. But we're going to see this is very much an exception. White castles, and black really doesn't have any better move than to take the pawn. Any other move like g6, white should have no worries for. It's not going to be. Black just has to have an advantage, the strong center. There's just no way. So the only response we're going to pay much attention to is where black tries to win this pawn. And we take, and now knight f3. And let's just glance at this position and see what we have for the pawn. Black is one pawn ahead, the pawn on d4. Okay, we have a very strong but very far advanced pawn on e5. Both of our bishops are very active. We already have one a tempo on the black queen, which is going to have to move. We're going to have very rapid development. Very important to understand. Yes, white is a clear pawn down. A clear pawn down. But if you look at the winning percentages for this opening, and I don't believe in choosing openings based solely on winning percentages, but they do give some information. This is a killer for white. I mean, it is very high in terms of the winning percentage for white. So black, really the only realistic move is to play queen b6. You wouldn't want to play the queen to c5 right away, because it's going to, after the bishop, you know, the rook is going to c1 anyway. But we play queen out to a4. And this move, this is the move I'm recommending you play. It's very important to play this. And the reason is, A, it prevents the knight from coming to c5, which we don't want just yet. And B, it prepares queen g4. And this is very irritating. And now we see another really good reason why this opening is so sharp. Black's a pawn up, but look at white's position. He's just going to be very quick to attack. So the main move here is queen b4, trying very much to exchange queens. And I'm going to go over this next, but I just want to cover a sideline. If black just doesn't respect white's attack and plays something like bishop e7, and this is a very sensible and natural move, after bishop e3, note, any black player who would be willing to take on b2, although the Rybka might tell you that's the best move, white should win this convincingly. Okay, there's no, black is not following chess principles. He's taking pawns, moving the queen way too many times. So black really should go back to d8, cut his losses, realize he's going to have to struggle, and after queen g4, just look optically at the position. And if we were, let's just do a little something. If I was black here, I would be quite worried, because white is bringing everything he's got, and black has no option to castle queenside, so eventually he has to castle kingside, and he's got to do it soon, unfortunately, because the queen is just bearing down on his position. Knight f6 is impossible. I wouldn't want to be here. So, just to give you a... So the move that is most accurate for black to play is queen b4. We, of course, do not want to trade queens here. Queen c2. And the next move, which is the best, is queen c5, trying to, again, trade queens. And we play queen e2. So this is the main line. And, you know, after bishop e7, which is the natural move here, bishop e3, we win more time on the queen. And this is where I'm going to stop, and I want to show you a game. And just to illustrate how quickly black can get ripped to pieces. And maybe this video will show you not to respect a pawn more than you respect the initiative. It is a very, very dangerous thing to do. And I would rather play white in this position any day of the week, pawn down or not. Because black's going to have to give back a pawn just to stay in the game eventually. So I want to bring up a game here. This is between Nadev and Moskalenko, two very strong players. And we're just going to fly through the opening really quick because we just looked at it. Black comes in, takes, and knight f3. So we've reached the position that most of the time will be reached. And let me just make a side note. You can't possibly know every black response. So a lot of weaker players will say, well, what if black goes, you know, to queen g4 himself? Or what if he plays queen c5? Or what if he plays queen b4? If you have to ask these questions, you need to realize that you can never know every response. You need to know the ideas. This is why memorization should be kept to a minimum. You need to understand ideas so that when moves that don't meet your expectations are played, you're not thrown for a loop, so to speak. So again, black attempts to trade the queens. And really, this should just prove to you how scared the black players are of this variation, that they're attempting to trade queens. Even though I can barely pronounce it, Moskalenko is a slightly stronger player. He wants just a draw here. He's not making any attempt to play for complications. He has a pawn up. So bishop e3, queen a5. This is the main response. Queen c7 is a weaker move because, of course, the rook, when the rook comes to c1, we're going to win even more time. So Moskalenko plays, Nadev plays rook fc1, taking control of the file, and black goes back to d8, respecting white's danger and threats of playing knight out to g5 here after castles, and there can be real problems once that bishop has to take. So white plays rook c3, possibly threatening to double on the c-file. And here black plays a characteristically bad move. I just think that... Alright, let's just look here. We understand what black wants. I mean, he wants to redirect the knight to c6, but let's just look at what white has. White is a pawn down, and essentially black has made one piece move. After it's all said and done, black is really only has made the bishop move to e7. And look at white. Everything is developed. This is the way to play against the French. There's no doubt about it. And it should come as no surprise why white would have won this game, even against a 2500 player. White plays knight d4, preparing A, to prevent knight c6, and B, preparing some possibilities with knight b5. Bishop d7, again trying to push through the knight, and black's in huge trouble here. Totally passive position. Hasn't castled yet. Rook b3, hitting the pawn on b7. Queen c7, and now queen g4. And this is the common idea. White dominates everywhere. Of course, he has no fear of queen taking the pawn on e5. Black has no time to capture any more material. And that's the point. Since white has such a strong initiative, black is struggling just for the time to survive. And g6 comes. Natural move, because he can't really castle. Bishop h6 would cause tremendous destruction. So bishop g5. White's more than willing to trade the dark squared bishops, considering the fact that black is weak on the dark squares. So takes. Black really doesn't have many options here. You can't play the queen back to d8, or the pawn on b7 is falling. So takes. Again, black's avoiding castling mainly because he's going to get in trouble after a move like h4, possibly bishop and move somewhere, and then the rook reroutes itself. Very dangerous attack here. White just moves back to f3, not even in a rush. White's not even in a big hurry here. Just protects the pawn. Bishop here. Bishop c8. Black has nothing. Black has absolutely almost nothing in this position. He's trying to trade queens. Queen h6, preventing castling. Bishop goes back. Rook comes into the game. Queen attempting to exchange yet again. Of course, now we have no worries of castling kingside. Queen f4, queen e7, and now a really nice move. Threatening, getting the queen involved, okay? Now, I think black makes a blunder here and plays the knight out to a5, attempting to simplify the game. And now he's in for a real surprise when black plays rook c7. And remember, black has never not castled. He's had no time. And equate initiative to time. It's as if white has had like 4 moves in a row to black, is what initiative ends up resulting in. Rook d8. Bishop takes, and the marvelous move queen a4. And black could have resigned right here. He played on knight takes b3, the check, and of course the queen is lost. And we enter this position, and this is an easily winning position, especially for a player at 2480. This is just trivial. Knight comes into a central square. The king is going off, running away to safety. White centralizes his king, shuts down the queenside play with h4. Rook attempts to come into the game. No such luck. These doubled pawns serve as a very good defense to keep the rooks out. Doubling. f3, king a7, and just queenside play. This doesn't need much explanation, as it has nothing to do with the opening and everything to do with simple converting a winning position. And there's a little bit of back and forth, a5, and now a great move, b6, rook d7, and queen d2, and either the rook over on h8 is lost, or there's mate. So, and this is not avoidable. So black resigned here. Quite a horrible resignation, and what a hideous move. I just kind of want to go back to, well, I'm skipping around, I'm sorry. I want to just go back to this marvelous position here where black plays knight b8, and it's as if white played many moves and black has just begun playing the game. So hopefully that is going to encourage you to take up this variation. You might need to watch this video some more or study the databases. Many strong players are playing it. It is not a sideline. It is a real weapon against the French, and I strongly recommend it. Thanks.